Here we are, Mark. Sunday night in the mag room.
All around the world you can hear them. Hey, hey, hey. Talking about news and kind of funny stuff. Hey, hey, hey. Mag room. Mag room. The mag room. The mag room.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mag Room. It's Sunday night with my good friend Jarrod.
Hi.
Hi, Jarrod. I'm Mark, and we have a guest tonight. Her name is Dr. Grace Chen. She is, how about you introduce yourself, Grace, and then I'm going to tell you the impetus behind this, and then we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. So as mentioned, I'm Grace Chen. I'm a faculty at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and I'm a urogynecologist.
Right. Now, we're two guys, so we're a little out of sorts here. Your specialty is not us. But I've told a few stories on this show of me, incontinence stories, I guess you'd say, if you didn't want to be dirty about it, if you wanted to be medical. And Jarrod makes fun of me and says I have a problem. So I thought we could have you on the show and tell us some of the serious side of incontinence and tell me if I have any problems, and you could tell what kind of work you do and go from there and just have a conversation about this. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I have to admit, I'm especially grateful to both of you, being as that this topic or my field really doesn't pertain to you. So I'm really grateful that you're interested in this. And speaking of humor, you have to be able to add levity into things, right? So
Sure.
I think we need to be able to laugh at ourselves and sometimes at each other, and that's okay.
The problem is that's all Jarrod and I do is just laugh at each other.
Well, you laugh and hopefully you're educating others.
Yeah, it's true.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yes. So, Mark, do you want to tell like a story of something that you?
All my stories about. One of the things that I'll say is, I was actually talking to a friend of mine like 2 days ago about you coming on, and I was saying, I don't think I have a problem. I've told like every one of my incontinence stories on here. It's not like I don't have like one a week. I had like 4 or 5 in my adult life. They're all kind of funny. I fell through the front door of my house while I was pooping my pants once because it had been. It's one of those things that like there's not really one specific. Like the thing that you wrote, you said that there's different. Not knowing that you have to go, not having enough time to get there. There's different like things that factor into it, and I'd say my stories kind of run the gamut of all those things, and I don't think I have a problem. What like how many times?
Like, can I follow up with what you're saying?
Sure.
So, would you like us to call you Grace or Dr. Chen? Just so you
No, please call me Grace.
Okay. So Grace, with like your normal clients, probably many are like post-pregnancy, I would bet, women who have trouble with like pees type stuff. But some of it has to do, I bet, with like you exercise or you laugh and maybe you pee. And Mark often has those happen where
I've had sneezing. I've had a
like
bunch
he
of
sneezes
and
or
coughing. Yeah,
and then he like poops his pants. So, and we've. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think we were honest with each other. We've all had those incidents. Let's be honest, right? There's always been times in which you laugh too hard and all of a sudden you're like, oops, I had a little accident. And
I'm just willing to talk about them.
Well, right. And we should all be. I mean, why not?
Thank
right?
you, Grace.
It's a part of our daily existence for some people anyway.
Well, Grace, come on. It's not my daily existence.
Well, I would hope not. Otherwise you would need
More like
to.
every presidential term.
So you're thinking Mark could be like a leader of the movement of the people who secretly poop their pants but aren't willing to talk about it.
Well, I'm thinking if Mark truly does that on a regular basis, then he should seek help.
First, yes.
Well, here.
How about like, so he's more like what would it be, like a hobby? It's more like a hobby. You're not like a professional pants pooper. You're like a hobby, like occasionally, like somebody who tried weed in college.
It only only becomes a problem if it's affecting your quality of life, right? And so a lot of women, they may have these issues, and men, right?
Sure.
Men have these issues on occasion throughout their lifetimes. But unless it starts impacting their quality of life, unless it starts impacting their careers, they may not seek help.
I see.
And, Jarrod, you had mentioned that, is it women who just gave birth? So certainly one of the biggest risk factors for urinary issues in women is absolutely childbirth. Mm-hmm. The other huge risk factor is just getting older, right? And obviously we're all getting older because, what's the alternative, right? And so you can imagine then that this is a very prevalent problem, because most women have given birth at some point in their lives. And obviously we are all getting older.
So you said, though, you're dealing with a lot of people peeing, but not as many pooping. So the pooping is definitely more of a concern if you do it fewer
this is
times.
Leading the witness. If we were in court, I think you're leading the witness, right?
I'm just rephrasing. I want to understand it closer.
Well, maybe so. One of the good things maybe we should have come out of this is like when do you know that you're having a problem? When are you outside of the realm of normalcy and like incontinence?
Yeah, because one of Mark's stories was he was on the way to work and then he was late for his job. He had to go back home, and then he showered.
That's the one I was thinking of.
He didn't just
I was driving in.
Yeah, he didn't just wipe himself at home. He had to shower, and then he was late, and he owns a business, and he had to open late.
Too. Oh, can I do a quick sidebar? Hey, Grace, I did. All right, so I did. I pooped myself. I used to have a job where I was traveling a lot. So I was on the road a lot, probably eating poorly, fast food. And I had to drive home to change my clothes. And when I got home, Jarrod thought I should have just wiped my butt, put new clothes on, and gone. But I had been sitting, I was driving like 30 minutes after having pooped my pants. Wouldn't you take a shower as well as... Am I asking too many questions of someone who's highly regarded in the medical field? Do you understand? Do you get what I'm...
Listen, you have to have a sense of humor about this. So I totally agree with you, Mark. I would have showered. I would have cleaned out my car. To be honest, depending on how big the accident
sold my car.
I may have sold. Yeah, exactly. Needed to sell my car. But going back to, I think one of the questions that Jarrod alluded to was, why is urinary incontinence or why is leakage of urine so much more common than leakage of stool? And it's just a matter of physics, right? Because urine is liquid and it's so much harder to keep in liquid than it is stool, right? For the most part, unless you're having diarrhea, but even with diarrhea, there is a solid component, right? So it's a lot easier to control what is solid. That's a simplistic way to look at things, but I think it makes logical sense. Yeah.
And what do you think? When does it become like when? So just you said like if it starts to affect your life. So if you're doing it and you have to drive home from work and shower twice a day.
So I think that's where it becomes very subjective, right? Because so I have some younger women who, they come because they're leaking urine when they play tennis, and to them that's bothersome enough to want to do something about it. And a lot of times these women actually want surgical options instead of just conservative options, because again, for them, that is bothersome enough. And so I think especially as a physician, my job is not to tell the patient what to do, right? Especially when it comes to quality of life concerns. I would say that is in general for any medical concerns, but certainly for quality of life, I think my job is to listen to the patients and their complaints and, how these symptoms impact their life, present with them treatment options that are reasonable, again, given their conditions and symptoms, and then really empower them to find a solution that fits them the best, right? It's absolutely not my job to, force them or even to kind of coerce them into one treatment option. It's really to just make sure that they understand what the options are and then together make a decision.
Yeah, so what are the options?
What's a surgical option?
Yeah, so for the woman with tennis and pee.
As a tennis player, I do relate to this one, by the way.
Comes in. What are their options?
Right. So it really depends on what type of urinary leakage they have. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of patients don't understand. Because if you think about it, well, from a lay person's perspective, leakage is just leakage, right? But that's simply not the case. So you could have leakage from coughing, sneezing, physical activities like playing tennis. And typically that's what we call stress urinary incontinence. And with that, there is a outpatient surgery. It's called the sling procedure. And what it does is it basically reinforces the support under the opening of the bladder, so that hopefully when they're putting pressure on it, like when they're jumping around playing tennis, the woman doesn't leak. Okay. Now, you could have other causes of incontinence, of course. And so if they have, for example, urgency incontinence, and that's the type where when you feel the urge to use the toilet, you don't make it in time. It's also called overactive bladder, which is, a condition where women feel like they're constantly using the toilet, like every hour, for example. And a sling procedure wouldn't work for that type of incontinence, right? So it's really all about the different types of incontinence. And this is a really important point because, again, from a lay perspective, leakage is leakage. But that's simply not the case. You really have to arrive at what is the cause of the leakage and then find the appropriate treatment.
So how about for Mark, like somebody like Mark who's pooping his pants? What is his options? Is there like a surgical option for your butt as well?
There is, and again, that also depends on why he's pooping in his pants, right? Because the fact of the matter is that if you're pooping in your pants because you're always having diarrhea, then maybe the solution is to treat the diarrhea rather than treat whatever else, right? And so so
I should stop eating diarrhea.
Well, you should stop eating something that's going to give you diarrhea. Certainly.
Right.
I think it's important to understand the nuances, right? And to find somebody who is specializing in this field so that you really can get the spectrum of the various treatment options that are available to you, and also understand, the nuances between the different conditions that may be related but are obviously different.
So what's an age, like an average age for when people might start to have these kind of things? I'm 48. Am I getting towards am I still 10 years away or 20 years away from when I should start to worry about this, or?
Well, so from a anatomic perspective, as I'm sure you're both aware, men and women are very different down there. So so you guys obviously have a penis, so your urethra is going to be much longer than the female urethra, and the urethra is just opening to the bladder, right? So a woman's urethra is only about 4 centimeters, and whereas obviously a man's penis can vary a great deal in length, but the point is that it's going to be longer than 4 centimeters, you hope, right? In addition, you guys have a prostate. And the prostate is almost like a valve, if you will, in some ways. And so it's much less likely for men to leak urine unless they've had prostate issues or require surgery on their prostates. But in a woman, just because of the length of the urethra or the opening of the bladder, it's much more common. And in women, again, they can present as early as around their childbearing years, right? Because I just mentioned one of the biggest risk factors having had babies.
Is there a urinary health month?
That there is, and I'm having trouble coming up with when it is, but you're right. There is.
Right, but right around Valentine's Day, I bet.
Well, you may be right.
What about for like a guy, just like speaking for a friend, I've heard as you get older, you pee more, like you feel like you have to pee more like at night, like you get up. Like, is that in a similar ballpark or is that a different thing? Okay,
so you guys, I'm not a urologist.
Yes,
and the last time was when I was a medical student. But that has to do with the prostate. So because the prostate almost acts like a valve, the issue typically for men as you get older is you can't finish urinating, like you retain urine, or it takes you longer to pee, right? Longer to urinate.
Yes.
And so because of that, you may get up more at nighttime because during the day, you may not necessarily be completely emptying your bladder. And by the way, I just Googled this, so thank thanks to Professor Google, but November is Bladder Health Awareness.
Okay, November, right around Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yes, there you go. Quite appropriate.
Everybody should bring it up
I
at
feel
the
like that should be the
Thanksgiving
opposite. I
table.
think that should be anus, fecal awareness month.
Maybe they're both.
Yeah.
But you could bring it up at the next family gathering, Thanksgiving, because if people don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, I absolutely, totally think that people should. I mean, I talk about it all the time because that's what I do, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, in bars and, other public
Do you
places.
get invited to a lot of parties?
Well, I'm pretty popular, yes.
I like it.
But the point is that, these are topics that, especially as women, and I hate to be generous about it, but I think a lot of women are ashamed to talk about, kind of leaking in their pants. And they should talk about it, because once they talk about it, number one, they'll be aware of how common it is, right? So I'm sure, again, based on the statistics I just quoted you, at least one other person in their, dining room table, as long as they have, a few women, will have these issues, right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is that there's so many treatment options. I mean, we so far have talked about the surgical option, but there are also conservative options, right? A lot of non-surgical, non-medical options that they can opt for. So I do absolutely encourage women to talk about it. And in fact, with a lot of my patients, one thing that I do ask of them is that, now that they're aware, and now that they're aware of all the various treatment options, they should also be their family members' advocates, their friends' advocates. They should be spreading the word about how common these conditions are, and how really there's no need to live with these symptoms.
Sure.
If it's bothersome enough, you should get help, or at least talk to somebody to know what your options are.
Right. Is there exercises as well? I bet there's exercises.
Kegels.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. So Mark, I'm kind of hearing that this is kind of a problem for you, since you are a little bit
Since
more
I know what a
expert.
Kegel is?
Yes.
I will
maybe
tell you this.
because
I've
you-
known what Kegels were for I learned about Kegels in high school for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
From who?
Oh, you had a good education.
You were pooping your pants in high school already, or?
No, Jared's so dumb he doesn't even know what a Kegel is, Grace. I'm sorry. Has nothing to do with pooping your pants. Or does it? I think it's more of a peeing your pants thing,
No,
right?
it can actually also help with leakage of stool.
Interesting, Mark. Huh?
Yeah,
I wonder how Jared knew that, Grace. Let's all just start pointing fingers at each other.
Nice.
Well, but listen, there's no shame in this, right? We
Yeah,
wanna
why
talk
are you
about it.
shaming
That's the
me,
whole
Mark?
point.
I'm the one that tells the stories. You're the one that won't admit that you've ever pooped your pants. I've told 5 stories in 127 episodes.
That's true. I mean, it's not a pants pooper. I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you are. You just won't admit it.
I know.
Well, at least not yet, right?
No, not
well,
yet.
yeah,
I
one of
have a
these
growth
days.
mindset. Someday. I will be.
So Kegel exercises, so it's named after Dr. Kegel, but they're basically pelvic floor muscles. And these pelvic floor muscles, the way I describe them to patients, which I think is easy to picture. So you can picture these muscles like a big rubber band. It's a big band of muscles, and it supports your pelvis. And so what you have down in your pelvis is, of course, you have your bladder. And then in a woman, you, of course, have the vagina and the uterus. And then you have the rectum. And because of these muscles, it helps to kind of support everything that's down there and helps things down there work, normally. And so it helps to prevent leakage of urine. It helps to prevent leakage of stool, and again, Jarrod can appreciate this as well, but there's always been times in which, let's say you eat something wrong, or you, heavens forbid, have, deli belly. You're feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm going to poop in my pants, right? These pelvic floor muscles help you hopefully get to a toilet in time before you actually do poop in your pants.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do, right? Similarly, let's say you guys are in the middle of a podcast and you just had a whole bunch of coffee and you feel like you really have to go urinate.
Mark
But
always goes to pee in the middle of the podcast.
I do. He's right.
There you go. Well, theoretically, these pelvic floor muscles can help you, kind of hold your bladder until it is a socially appropriate time to go and empty it.
So how do you
But
know
I
if
don't
you're
think it's
doing them?
ruining-
Oh, go ahead.
I don't think it's affecting my quality of life, though. Just having to take a 2-minute pee break in the middle of a podcast. Is it affecting your quality of life, Jarrod?
Yes, I have to wait for
Adding
you.
the 2 minutes on
Yeah,
there?
it's tough.
All right, I'll start wearing a diaper to the podcast. That's fine.
How do you know if you're doing Kegels correctly?
It's a great question because these muscles are hidden, right? They're on the inside.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's hard for women to be able to feel them, especially if they've given birth vaginally. So if they've had vaginal deliveries, because oftentimes these muscles can become damaged during childbirth, right? And that's why childbirth is a big risk factor for these type of conditions.
Sure.
And so typically what I would urge women to do, obviously at the time of exam, I do assess for these muscles and how strong they are. But oftentimes, I would recommend that they see a pelvic floor physical therapist. So there are physical therapists that specializes in these conditions and specializes in the pelvic floor. And the way I urge them to think about this is thinking about these therapists like their very own, very private personal coach, right?
Yep.
We all know that if we have a coach or a teacher, we are held accountable. And so we're going to be better at both doing our exercises, but in addition to that, the pelvic floor physical therapist, they spend time with them, doing bladder diaries, meaning looking at their leakage patterns, helping them the patients try to assess, well, what is it they're doing? Are there certain behavior patterns that are leading to more leakage episodes? They can also help them, kind of monitor their intake and again, try to help them identify if there are indeed certain irritants that they're consuming that may be leading to more leakage. In addition to all that, I'm using the example of the woman who has overactive bladder, the woman who feels like she has to urinate all the time. You can actually do these pelvic floor exercises or, these Kegel exercises to prolong the interval between voids. So for example, let's say you're going every hour. But, you're going every hour because you feel the urge to go, but there's not really enough urine in the bladder for you to really have to go. You can actually do these exercises to extend the time between voids. So instead of going every hour, you can do the exercises to try to go every hour, 15 minutes, every hour and a half, so forth and so on to gradually prolong the interval between voids.
And the exercise is just like, it's you make the same like thing that you make when you're stopping your flow of urine, right? It's like
Correct.
I don't really know how to describe it, but I just figured for the sake of listeners who might not know.
Is that the only exercise that there is?
No, I again, I'm not a physical therapist, right? So you're
sure.
So this is a little
bit
bit
much
outside.
more qualified than either of us, though. So we'll just.
Well, that's true, but I also don't want to mislead your audience. But
qualifies me for something.
Typically, these exercises will involve the pelvic floor, but the pelvic floor muscles are really part of your core, right? So I know that a lot of the physical therapists will also work with patients on strengthening their core as well.
Okay.
So they really do all sorts of different things, and patients, of course, always ask. So first of all, patients are oftentimes very surprised when I mention that there are physical therapists that do this. They're like, really, what? Because they're used to physical therapists helping them when they break a limb, or things like that. And so once I tell them that, of course, they're filled with questions of, well, how long are they going to do this for, et cetera, et cetera. And, my spiel to them always is, well, the physical therapists don't tell me how to do surgery. So I certainly don't tell them how to do physical therapy.
Yep.
So, you should go and give it a try, and I'm sure they'll fill you in with all sorts of details. And the fact of the matter is, if you go to physical therapy and you don't like it, well, you just stop going,
Sure.
So really it's not something that's so consequential, right? It's not a big step like surgery.
I have a very basic question that's going to make me sound like an idiot. You brought up the prostate a few times, and I know it's not your expertise, but I know you're supposed to get your prostate checked, and you described it as a valve, but I don't even know what the prostate is. Can you just tell me, is that all it is a valve that opens to let the urine go from here to there, or is it what is a prostate?
Okay, so again, just caveat.
No, I know. It's not your
It's not
field of
really a
expertise.
valve. It's really a gland. For me, I described it as a valve just to explain the whole incontinence mechanism, but it's really a gland, and it basically produces fluid that's part of semen.
Okay.
So it really does have important function. But the reason why it becomes problematic, especially as you get older, is that, it can kind of get bigger. You can have prostate hyperplasia, right, in a way. And again, because it surrounds the urethra, and the urethra, you can think of it as a pipe. And if you have something external to it, and that external thing is getting bigger, right, it's almost like a valve. Yeah, exactly. It's restricting the flow of urine.
So we really just need to publicize these Kegel exercises.
Well, so again, for men, the more common issue is not being able to empty well, right? And so the Kegel exercises, so the same thing, I described them as a rubber band, right? And when you're doing the exercise, you're tightening that rubber band. So if you tighten something, if you do this in a men who has prostate issues, that's preventing them from urinating well, that's actually going to make your urination worse in a way.
Oh, really?
Right? Because, again, I'm not saying that, you as a man shouldn't be doing these exercises. I'm just saying that you should, if you're contracting your Kegels and having trouble urinating, you're going to make that worse, right? Because, Mark, you mentioned that, hey, how do I, do the Kegel exercises? Is that the same thing as stopping the flow of urine, right? So you're going to make that issue worse. Now, because men have issues with their prostates, and a lot of times they require some sort of, surgery or something to intervene, they may then have leakage of urine after that, right? Because, that prostate is no longer there, kind of restricting the flow of urine. And, you could go to the reverse where you're having you're able to urinate better, but then similarly, you're now leaking more. And then the Kegel exercises can help you.
What's your, Grace, what's like a normal day for you as a doctor?
Well, it depends. So I would say I spend about a third of my time operating. And then about 2/3 of my time seeing patients in clinic. In terms of my clinical time, because I'm an academic physician, I obviously spend time doing research, teaching, so I spend time doing other stuff. But in terms of the clinical responsibilities, about a third of my time is spent in the operating room and about 2/3 is spent in the clinic seeing patients.
Oh, wow. I didn't expect that answer.
What did you expect, Mark?
I don't know. I guess I didn't really know that you operated at all. Not that I read tons of your stuff, but I read a few things that you did, and I don't remember reading much about surgery. But
well, my research hasn't been focused on surgery, and actually, the research I have focused on surgery is actually on surgical education. So I do a lot of work with our computer scientists using like artificial intelligence methods to assess surgical motion. But that's different than like clinical surgery, right? But as I mentioned, one of the treatment options for incontinence is a sling surgery, and that is a surgery. And keep in mind that I don't just help women with urinary incontinence, right? There's other things I do. So, going back to leakage of stool, depending on why you're having leakage of stool, there's also surgery you can do for that.
So what kind of surgery could Mark get?
Okay, so depending on why you're leaking. So for example, let's say you're leaking stool because you have a hole between, the anus and in the women's case, a vagina. So let's say you have a hole between the anus and the vagina, right? And so you're going to leak stool because you have a hole there. And so that's called a rectal vaginal fistula. So a fistula is just a hole between two places that shouldn't have a hole. right? So it's communication of two places that shouldn't be communicating.
Yep.
And so you could do surgery to get that repaired, for example.
Okay.
That sounds like it could be really bad. Like it could cause you to go like septic or something. Could that happen?
No, because it's usually pretty localized. So, it's close to the opening. And so sepsis doesn't occur typically if you can kind of release things. So because it can kind of flow out of you, typically they don't have sepsis. But certainly it's debilitating, right? Because if you have leakage...
It's not going into your bloodstream or anything? I guess not. You're telling me it's not, but...
No, because again, it can leak out, right? Like something goes into your bloodstream if it has no place to go. So that's why if you have like an abscess or pus pocket and this pus pocket isn't being drained, it has no place to go, it can go into your bloodstream. And so this is a little bit different. But having said that, it can be quite debilitating. I mean, Mark, we joked earlier about you taking a shower because you pooped on yourself, right? And so imagine women, in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia where there's no running water. They can't just go and take a shower, right? If they have stool leakage, it's
they probably don't have a car either.
Well, exactly. It's quite problematic, right? The other thing is that, thankfully, I know you had to drive home, so you had to be sitting in the stool for a while. But the point is that
a long time.
Well,
I'd say about 30 minutes.
So 30 minutes may seem a long time to all of us. It's not necessarily a long time to somebody who, to your point, don't have transportation, right?
Right.
And so you can think about the skin being exposed to that stool. Not only is it, for lack of a better word, gross, but it can also be very caustic. It can cause the skin to break down.
So next time, Mark, you should walk home just to...
Take my pants off and drive home.
Do women ever get the reconstructive pelvic surgery for like sex reasons or no?
They do, but we, at least, I can't say all of us, but most urogynecologists were cautioned against that.
I see.
And it just depends, right? Like if there is a good reason. So let's say a woman, haven't had sex in a very long time, and unfortunately, sometimes depending on their other conditions, the vagina can kind of almost close off, right?
Oh, wow.
And let's say they find a new partner and they now want to have sex and they can't. And certainly in those women, you absolutely, if they fail conservative options, you absolutely should recommend surgery.
Sure, yeah.
Wait a second.
But on the
You're
other
saying that
Oh, I'm sorry.
If a
go
woman
ahead.
doesn't have sex, if a woman doesn't have sex for a long time, her vagina might close up. Is that what you're saying?
Well, okay, so it's
You're
not
sounding
so
less and less credible to
generalizable.
me.
They typically will have some other conditions as well. So for example, there are certain skin conditions that causes the tissue to become very irritated. And when you have a tissue that's very irritated and there's not something keeping an area open, it can, what we call agglutinate or stick together, right?
Oh, wow.
What was the word?
Agglutinate.
Butanate.
Yeah, basically stick together. And it's not common, but absolutely it can happen. And so for those women, again, we would still try to do conservative options first, because a lot of times, using a dilator, or creams or ointments that are similar can help open it up. But then if they fail that, and certainly,
hose?
I'm sorry?
A garden hose?
Well, I probably wouldn't recommend that.
No.
But the point is that they may need surgery, right? But here's the other issue is that you have some women that want surgery because they feel loose and they want things to be tightened up.
Yep.
And, and I'm not saying that that's absolutely wrong all the time, but you just have to take those cases on an individual fashion and be very careful, right? Because the problem is if you do any type of surgery, there is always risks involved.
Yes.
And whenever you cut anywhere in the human body, scar tissue forms. And what scars do is they tend to contract. So even though these women are feeling loose or whatever, they may end up feeling too tight and then have pain with intercourse, right? So you may really shove them into kind of the other end of the problem, if you will. So I think most of us as urogynecologists would be very cautious in dealing with women that, come to us saying that they feel too loose and they want things tightened up.
That's not a Hopkins. That's not a Johns Hopkins thing. That's more like a USC surgery or something like that. University of Texas.
Nice.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, you don't have to comment on that.
Excellent.
Mark, you got any other questions or?
I brought a couple of incontinence stories that I thought I could read to you, and you could comment like we normally do. I don't know. You want to hear a story or two about incontinence?
Sure. That's what I do all day long, so I'm very open to hearing stories about incontinence. As long as it's in women and not men. Because I think you've asked me enough male incontinence questions.
That's fair. It's fair.
Well, this actually involves women and men.
Okay.
A bucket of hot diarrhea was randomly poured on a woman by a homeless man. By Joel Grover and Amy Corral. A night near the
What's
Hollywood
the source
Walk of
of this
Fame.
article?
I can't remember where I got it.
Okay.
I just know Joel Grover and Amy Corral wrote it.
Okay.
A night near the Hollywood Walk of Fame would change a woman's life as she was getting into her car and a homeless man sprinted across Hollywood Boulevard toward her. Heidi Van Tassel was parked in Hollywood after having a pleasant evening out with friends at an authentic Thai restaurant.
They have to say it's authentic. That's good.
It wasn't like a mall food court.
No,
place.
no,
It was
authentic.
a real one. Suddenly, a man randomly pulled her out of the car, dragged her out into the middle of the street, and dumped a bucket of feces on her head, Van Tassel said, and public records confirm. It was diarrhea, hot liquid. I was soaked, and it was coming off my eyelashes
So fitting.
into my eyes. Paramedics who came to treat me said there was so much of it on me that it looked like the man was saving it up for a month. So
That's quite an interview after you've gotten diarrhea dumped all over you.
I thought all sorts of thoughts went
I
through
think
my
I would have
mind.
went no comment at the end
I
of
would
it.
never tell anybody about this story. I would drive home and shower like I did back in the day.
Yeah.
And
I would
tell
also
you.
definitely shower. On
Yeah.
the record, I would shower after that one.
So, but would you beat the guy up? Like, would you fight the guy or would you just take off? If somebody dumped diarrhea on you.
I think you'd be stunned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would be so eager to get this thing off of me that I mean, even though obviously, retaliation would be the second thing on my mind, but the first thing is definitely to get rid of it.
Oh, not eye for an eye retaliation. You just mean fighting back and some,
Wow,
dumping
or
diarrhea
somehow.
on you.
Taking the long game, I'm going to poop in a bucket for another month.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
do the
You
same.
you actually probably have access to some diarrhea through your job as well. That would be pretty.
Well, I would say that it would speak very poorly of my life if that's what I thought about is how to retaliate against this man. Right? That's right.
If you were a big person, like I'm not, I would think of retaliation as well. You would just be like, I forgive you, right? And you'd want to find out about the homeless man and you'd rehabilitate him back to...
I would say that probably has something to do with mental health, I would think.
For
right?
sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there's planning in that as well.
The one thing I wanted to tell you is there were two quotes in here that I thought were interesting from this story.
Okay.
Besides just the bucket of hot diarrhea headline. She said, it's so traumatic. The PTSD that I'm dealing with is beyond anything I've ever felt. And then this is the part that was interesting to me. There needs to be some kind of help for the victims of these crimes.
Okay.
Now, does she mean I want there to specifically be groups for, hi, my name is Mark and I've had diarrhea dumped on my head? Or is it like, hi, my name is Mark and a homeless guy did something terrible to me? I don't know what she's going for there. Do a lot of people get, in your line of work, Grace, have you heard very many stories of diarrhea getting dumped on people's heads? Enough to necessitate or warrant a support group?
Yeah, I have to admit, this is the first.
First one.
There you
Okay,
go.
me too.
Yeah, but having said that, I live in Baltimore City, so certainly we have our share of panhandlers and homeless.
this is from Vulture.com. Gwyneth Paltrow's bestie bowel blowout explained by Rebecca Alter, a staff writer. So you were offline this weekend, enjoying the actual world, and now it's Monday, and you're back at your desktop, and everyone is talking about this guy, Derek Blasberg, who allegedly diarrheaed. I don't think that's the correct past tense, but
what is the past tense?
Well, had diarrhea.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. Who allegedly diarrheaed all over Gwyneth Paltrow's guest house bathroom at one of her properties in the Hamptons, or possibly Montecito, California. You want to know what's going on without having to ask someone or click on a Daily Mail link. We got you.
Those are quite different locations, though.
They couldn't even pinpoint where this guy had diarrhea. But I thought the messed up thing was, so it goes into who is Derek Blasberg? What's Derek Blasberg's relationship to Gwyneth Paltrow? What happened? And so I just think, shouldn't there be a little bit of, I guess once you're hanging out with Gwyneth Paltrow, maybe this is thrown out the window, but anonymity. Like if I have diarrhea, if Jarrod was an action movie star, you know, Die Hard 6 was coming out, Jarrod was playing the main role, and we were hanging out all weekend and I had diarrhea, shouldn't there be a little bit of, you don't have to tell everybody about it, right? Now, this is coming from the guy that already has told all my diarrhea
But you've
stories,
told it, not somebody else.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think it's...
Maybe this guy planted it to become famous.
I think, oh yeah, maybe.
Or to raise awareness for a problem that we've already talked about.
Like Grace, like our guest Grace.
But what was the point of that article? Like, why was it read?
That's a great question.
Because I'm still not getting the punchline. Is there a punchline?
Because news these days doesn't have to be about anything. All it says is, I mean, the title of the article is Gwyneth Paltrow's bestie bowel blowout explained.
So someone had diarrhea at her house and that was news?
He's a writer and a media personality who's based in New York, but he's found in vacation destinations around the globe with his celebrity and fashion industry friends. He's worked everywhere from Vogue to Harper's to Vanity Fair to CNN.
So is this like an expose? Like he was anti-diarrhea? Like he would kick people out of his group?
He just had diarrhea and now everybody knows about it.
Yeah, but maybe he was like outspoken about the diarrhea was bad and
like when that congressman got caught with the guy in the bathroom.
Yeah, when he had talked against it. Maybe this guy was way out about how diarrhea was awful and if you had it, you should be kicked out of the country, and then he had diarrhea, so it was a big story.
Or maybe it's a prelude to maybe he's going to have a diarrhea, what is it?
Blog?
Like Chronicles or, you know, or some sort of stand-up diarrhea tour.
Like the Vagina Chronicles. No one's ever done a diarrhea Chronicles.
Did you say a stand-up diarrhea tour?
Yeah. Or in this case, maybe better if he just sat down.
What's a stand-up diarrhea tour? Do you tell stories about diarrhea, or do you have diarrhea on stage?
Probably both. You'd have to finish with the diarrhea at the end.
Or at least have a poop emoji.
Would you go see that show, Grace?
Well, considering this is what I deal with on a daily basis.
So you would?
No, yeah, maybe that would. It might not be entertainment though.
If you get good tickets, will you take me?
Yeah.
What if Mark, you could do it with all your poop exploits? You're like halfway there. But we really appreciate you coming on. Is there any last thing you want to say, like things people should know, or something you want to plug for your own self, or?
No, I think I've said it. I think the key is to talk about these issues, right? You do need to bring a sense of humor. I mean, I think, sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes we take things all too seriously. But the point is to talk about it, right? And then to get help.
Admit it. Admit it in front of all your friends.
Yep. Stand up and admit it.
Why not?
Dr. Grace Chen, thank you so much for being on with us.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Olivia, should I wrap up the show, Mark?
Yeah.
And Grace, you could stay on for this end part, or it's up to you.
Oh, sure. I'll listen.
All right. Great. Well, that was the show, everybody. It was produced by Jim Kegel, fact-checked by Bill, theme song by Mega Yellox, social media by Cousin Paul, Remember, you can always check us out on Instagram at the Magroom Pod. And you can send us an email, themagroom@hotmail.com, if you have any questions or comments about this episode.
Check out my new stand-up diarrhea tour. starting in the fall.
Yeah, stand-up diarrhea. What would be the name of it?
Stand up and splat.
I like that.
I don't know.
Einloth expels.
Okay.
All right, we got some time.
Alliteration's good.
We're also old school, so you can send us a letter. The Magroom, 10152 Indian Town Road, P.O. Box 9, Jupiter, Florida, 33478. Or, if you want to be the most secure, you can send us a fax, 561-744-1831. And we always appreciate everyone who contacts us.
Be the most secure.
Yep. And we always finish up with some hashtags, Mark.
Okay.
So hashtag, we always say, put down your phone this week. Grace, we think everyone is on their phone too much and that they should engage life more. So we always encourage people to put down their phone.
Something about, we need to do a hashtag about like talking about your, whatever. What's a good catch-all term
Don't
for like?
stay in the loo. Come on out and talk about it.
Yeah. The what? The loo?
The loo. Yeah, the toilet.
You call a toilet a loo?
All the time. Yep.
No, you don't. Don't. Okay.
Also,
I like it.
hashtag do your Kegel exercises.
Yeah. Yep.
Get those going. Get to the gym. And if all else fails, Mark, and you find you've pooped your pants, or you have a diarrhea tour and you're pretty sore because you're on that, you can always
stick with the Magroom, and everything else is cream cheese.
Grace, thanks
Thank
again
you,
for being on.
Grace.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
You too.
Have a good one.
You too.
Ooh, ooh, I like my groom. I like my groom. Ooh, ooh, my groom is good. My groom is good. Ooh, ooh, I like my groom. I like my groom. Ooh, ooh, my groom is good. My groom is good. The my groom's good. Ooh, ooh, I like my groom. I like my groom. Ooh, ooh, my groom is good. My groom is good.
You're pooping in your pants because you're always having diarrhea.